are you ready? Can we get started?
Yeah.
Very good. So, welcome. After some organizational topics that we had in the last hour, we now have the first hour of our new school year. And the topic of today is a quick recap about Angular. I wasn't your Angular teacher in the last year, so I'm not 100% sure what you did, what you covered, where you did find enough time, and what you missed because maybe there was too little time last year. So we will do a quick recap. And my first question to you is a question that is very practically relevant. Why Angular? What is Angular? Why should anybody care for it? Why do we teach it here at this school? And why is the world a better place with Angular than without Angular? Yes, first one.
First of all, Angular is a framework for JavaScript.
Framework for JavaScript. Be more specific, not JavaScript, but TypeScript, right. Exactly.
And
it's a front-end framework or a back-end framework?
a front-end framework.
Front-end framework. Can Angular run on the server?
Yes.
Yes, it can. Very good. It can. But typically, it runs on the front end.
Yes.
Very good. Thank you. That was one aspect. So it is a framework for front-end development with TypeScript. Awesome. Do you know any other framework for web development in TypeScript? Yes?
React.
Same?
Yes.
React? Anything else?
Yes.
Huh?
I wanted to say this.
Yeah, also React? Vue, right? Yeah?
Electron.
Electron is not really a front-end framework. It's a framework for running web applications as a desktop app. But yes, you're right. The typical competitors of Angular are React and Vue. There are other, even more modern frameworks like Svelte. Have you ever heard of Svelte? Written Svelte. Svelte. You can take a look at it. It's really, really cool. You can build great stuff with it, but it's very modern. We don't do it here in school. So, okay, I got it. It's TypeScript. It's web development. So what is the difference? What is the specialty about Angular? Why do so many companies care about Angular and use it for their everyday development work? We use it in my own company every day. Why? What do you think? Yeah?
Because it's used by Google.
It's used and built by Google.
By other.
That's correct. Many other companies use it too. But you could argue that React has been built and is heavily used by Facebook, for instance. And the guys and girls at Facebook, they also know what they are doing. But you are right. Compared to Vue, which large company is mainly maintaining the Vue framework? Do you know it? No? Nobody. Nobody. Vue is primarily on the shoulders of a single genius person. And it might be at risk when this person does no longer want to do some web development work. So this is a big difference between Angular, React, and Vue, for instance. But you're right. Because it is built by Google, you could argue that that's a big advantage for Angular. Right. What else? Yes?
Material design works.
Material design works. There is a very good implementation of material design, the design language that Google brought out for their Android platform, and it works very well with Angular. Right. What did you want to say?
I'm not quite sure, but I think the difference between Angular and React is that Angular doesn't have libraries at one place, and you just have one of them, and the project needs to be on the computer with those libraries. They're always copied into the project, so the projects are standalone.
I think that is true for both React and Angular. I think it is like that. But you are maybe on the right track. A big advantage of, yes, do you want to try?
There are many open source libraries for all of the stuff in Angular.
There are many open source libraries. Let's follow this track. That's true for React, that's true for Vue, that's true for Svelte. But there is a big difference between all these frameworks and Angular. Do you have an idea?
I just wanted to say it's true for all of them because they're all built on top of Node.
Yes, they're all built on top of Node and JavaScript environment and so on, that's true. But there is a big difference in Angular. I call Angular the Lord of the Ring framework. One ring to rule them all. What I mean with that is if you go for Angular, you get a huge framework. And many people say, because of that, Angular isn't great. It's too difficult to learn. It's too large. But the other side, the opposite side of that is, if you decide to go for Angular, you get a solution for most problems that you have in everyday web development. If you go for smaller frameworks, like Vue for instance, then you have to find specific solutions for every single little problem. It's a so-called best-of-breed approach. Angular is an integrated approach. Angular means that you go for Angular, if you do it the Angular way, then Google will take care of you. They will give you libraries for UI, for CSS, like Angular Material. They will give you a REST API client. They will give you build tools. They will give you a CLI. They will give you a library for every problem that you typically have as a web developer. And that is great for many developers because they want to build features. They don't want to spend their times looking for maybe incompatible libraries, fiddling out the very latest details, how to combine this library with that library. If you go for Angular, it's kind of boring. It just works. You take the Angular CLI, you create a project, and it just works. And you can focus on building features. Especially in the business-to-business world, that's super important because customers demand features. They don't pay you for solving incompatibilities between libraries. They pay you for features. If you build the latest and greatest consumer app, maybe a game or something that millions and millions of consumers are going to use, you might really want to have the control down to the latest bit of your application. And then maybe Angular is not the right framework for you. So if you are a black belt web developer and you know all the things about Node.js and JavaScript that there are to know, and you want to pick and choose exactly the right frameworks and libraries for exactly the right task, and you want to tune it to the last bit, then you might go for other frameworks. Understand what I mean? So if you get asked in practice, what is Angular and why does the HTL Leonding teach Angular as a web development framework? The answer is simple. It makes you productive. It enables you, even as a beginner, to build great apps in relatively short time, and it's very widely spread, especially in the business-to-business world. This is why we are using it. My company builds business-to-business software, and we are super productive with Angular. That's the point. Okay? Don't try to customize Angular to your specific way that is different from the way that the Angular developers at Google's intended it to be. If you want to force Angular into a certain route or to do something in a certain way, then it will get very, very, very hard. Angular is a so-called opinionated framework. It has an opinion of how to work, of how to do work. Follow this track, everything will be easy. Customize it to your specific way that is different from the one Google uses, you will have a hard time. Got it? Nice. Last thing, Angular is a single-page app framework. What does that mean? What is a single-page app framework? Single-page app, SPA, yes?
Make a website using more than one HTML file and linking them together via HTTP links. Call them.
Yeah, you're just describing web applications in general, but single-page apps are a little bit different. They are more specific than what you just said. You're on the right track. Anybody? Come on, what is a single-page app framework? You did Angular last year. What is the difference between Angular and ASP.NET MVC, for instance, or Node.js Express? Yes?
I think
single page apps are dynamically created on the user, also on the client?
On the client side, yes.
And everything else that's not the single page will get sent sort of with the data in the website already from the server to the client.
Exactly. I would like to rephrase your answer. In single page apps, the whole UI is built dynamically on the client side. So you run JavaScript, and this JavaScript builds the HTML on the client side. If you use a server-side framework like ASP.NET MVC, ASP.NET Razor Pages, Node.js Express, something like this, then as you put it, your data is used to generate HTML dynamically on the server. And then the HTML, the dynamically generated HTML, is sent to the client. So the client can be dumber. With single-page apps, the client needs to be smarter. Clear? That might definitely be a question in, for instance, an oral exam, that I ask you this question and to describe how this works. Okay? Good. Enough theory. We now know approximately what this Angular stuff is all about. So let's jump onto our machines and play a little bit with it. Today you got the prerequisites for this course that you have to install on your machines until next week. So it might be that not all of you can follow along on your own computer with the samples that I show you. That's not a problem. Today we just recap. If you don't have a laptop today, or if you don't have a running Angular installation today, just take a look, follow along, make notes until next week, and next week everything should be set up on your machines too, okay? Good. So let's switch to the laptops. If you want to follow along, I ask you to open command prompt, ideally in Windows Terminal. You can also do it in CMD. My first question is, quick recap, how do we create a new Angular app? With which tool? Yes? NG. That's the Angular CLI. So let me quickly show you what I mean with that. If we go for cli.angular.io, we will end up with the Angular CLI. This is the main tool that you're going to use to create Angular apps, to maintain these Angular apps, to change the settings, to add new components. And this tool is called NG. Here you see the tool, NG, right? We have one presentation in the course of this semester about the NX tools. NX is a tool from a very famous consulting company doing work with Angular, and they have written additional tools on top of NG for professional programs which consist of many different applications, libraries, front ends, back ends. So the NX tools, if you ever come across them, they are for professional large web development. The NG tools are for us and they are relevant for our course. So let's go here and let's call this NG tool and let's call it with -- version, and you will see that I have installed the Angular CLI version 12.2, and that's a decently new version. I think it's the newest version. Maybe there is another patch I don't know by heart, but it's decently okay. You should have Angular 12 currently. That's the latest version. So what we can now do is we can say ng new -- help, and that will give us all the different options that there are available for creating a new Angular application. And I'm going to do exactly that. Now what I have prepared for you, and I will continue to work on that in the next weeks, is especially for preparing for the exams, I'm going to give you checklists for various different topics. And the first checklist that I prepared for you is a checklist for creating an Angular app. You find that in our GitHub repository at checklists 0020 creating Angular app. And here you see typical settings that we are going to use throughout this course. Okay? You see ng new, then the application name, and a few other options. So if you want, you can copy this one and put it into your Windows terminal. But of course you have to change the app name because app name doesn't make a sense like that. So let's remove that one and say this is hello Angular. Go for it. It will create an application which is called hello Angular in a subfolder which is called hello Angular. And at the end, when everything was created, it will run npm install. You should know what npm install is. It's fetching the node packages from npm and installing it into your node modules folder. Does anybody not know what I mean with node modules folder? Please be honest. I will not grade questions now. So you can ask questions if you are not sure. You know what node modules is? Awesome. Very good. You see, I am already done. Maybe it will take a little bit longer on your machines depending on the internet connection and on the speed of your laptop. Let me quickly give you a tip for those of you who would like to practice and who don't want to overflow your local laptop SSDs with data from node modules. Have we ever talked about stack blitz in the past? Does anybody not know what stack blitz is? Everybody knows what stack blitz is? Awesome. So just as a repetition, you can just click on Angular here and you will immediately get an Angular application with Visual Studio Code directly in your browser. No need to install anything locally. But we will in this course work with local tools because we want to practice that. Now, please cd change directory into the hello Angular folder and run, oh sorry, I forgot something, code dot, now it's okay. And please open Visual Studio Code for the application that we just created. So unfortunately your video beamer is cutting away a little bit of my screen, but I think there is nothing important cut away here. So that's fine. I will zoom in a little bit. Can you read it from the last rows? Is that still okay, or should I increase the font even more? A little bit? And let's do it that way. Is that okay? Good. Very good. Very good. Very good. So let's quickly take a look at the most important aspects of an Angular application. That's a repetition, and you should all know that already. The first thing that we want to do with any Angular application is run it. How do I do that? Who can help me? Yeah. You say ng run, ng serve, that would be a possibility, but I will not call this command because I want to give you a tip here. If you take a look at package.json, you will see, let me quickly start my zooming tool here. You will see here, see this one, a scripts section, and in the scripts section, you have a script which is called start. And here you see this ng serve. And it's a very good idea, even a better idea, to run this start script instead of directly running ng serve. So what you can do is you can say npm start. That's essentially running the ng serve that you said, but it's, there are slight details which are better when you use npm start. So I encourage you to use npm start. Then you can think about whether to share your usage data with Google. You can say yes or no, and then everything is compiled, and in a few more seconds, we should see our first Angular application. Not really difficult, as you can see it here. Let's open it up in the browser. Hooray, our first Angular application up and running. That was kind of trivial, right? Question, which build tool, which packaging tool, if we talk web development lingo, which web development packaging tool is working behind the scenes? Yes? NPM. Yes, but it's not a packaging tool. NPM is just a tool to run this thing. There is something sitting on top of NPM that is doing the building and providing the development web server, doing the packaging and so on. Who knows that? Did you ever hear of Webpack? You never heard of Web? Some of you have heard of Webpack. Webpack is awesome. It's really, really great, but it's difficult. And the beauty here is that you don't have to care about Webpack. There are alternatives, modern alternatives to Webpack. For instance, Parcel. Parcel is a great packaging tool. It's just one example. But Angular is built on top of Webpack. Please remember that. Angular is simplifying web development work because it completely automates Webpack for you. And Webpack is one of the most feature-rich and most powerful packaging tools for web development that you can currently get on the internet, okay? So remember, Webpack. So Webpack is running behind the scenes. And if you take a close look here, somewhere here, these outputs, parts of these outputs are, Webpack is a little bit shimmering through. But now you know it, it's Webpack working in the background. Awesome. Let's stop this ng serve again. And let's take a look what else we can do. What do you think? What is ng build? Yes?
It just builds the entire application but doesn't start it.
Okay, let's give that a try. Let me show you what we do. We say npm run build. By the way, why did I say npm start and now I have to say npm run build? Yes?
npm start is sort of a default.
Exactly. npm start is a shortcut. You could also say npm run start. But run and start is a kind of repetition, so they just said, okay, just say start. But if you want to run the build command, you have to say npm run build. Let's do that. Let's run npm run build. And then take a look at the upper left corner here. And you will see in a few seconds a new folder appear here. Let's wait for a few more seconds. And you will see, here is a new folder, dist, like distribution. And here in this dist folder, you have a subfolder, which is the name of the application. And inside of this folder, you have a single HTML page. Can you remember? Single page app. And a bunch of JavaScript. See? And of course, an icon. Question. What are these strange hexadecimal numbers? Looks like hexadecimal, right? What are they? Where do they come from and why are they important? Who has an idea? Hey, that is important. That's an important one. So it's not just a repetition, you learn something new. You have a guess?
I think it has something to do with the cache of the browser so that the client doesn't always have to fetch them each time.
Exactly, exactly. Okay, somebody's shouting out there. You said it has to do something with the browser cache. The mechanism is called cache busting. What's happening behind the scenes is that these hexadecimal numbers and letters are calculated from what? From the content of the file. It's a file hash. It's a hash value, the hash value of the file content. That means, you were perfectly correct, if we change anything in this file, even a single letter in JavaScript, if you change anything in your application, then the name of the file will change. That means we can aggressively cache all the files, because if anything changes, the system will get a new file name and will not look up the old version in the cache. It will download the new version. This technique is called cache busting. Got it? And that's important. So if you put these files onto your web server and people are using your files, then you can cache the JavaScript files forever on the client side, and that will speed up your app. Got it? Awesome. Now let's try another build statement. This one is important. Please stay with me. npm run build dash 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 configuration development. You also have it written here, see? So I run the build statement again, but this time I'm passing in a parameter that says configuration development. Now if you take a look now at the folder, see it here, it looks a little bit different. The main difference is that we don't have cache busting enabled. That's by design, because on a development server, you typically don't cache. And then you have these map files. See these map files here? Question, what are map files? You can guess it. What are map files? Okay, let me change the question. Is a browser, a modern browser today, capable of executing TypeScript directly? No. What can the browser execute? Yes? JavaScript, right. If you debug your app, what do you want to see in the debugger? TypeScript, the code that you have written, or the compiled JavaScript file? Well, obviously TypeScript, right? So these map files, they contain a map with which the debugger can translate JavaScript during debugging back into TypeScript. So you see TypeScript on the screen in debugging, and this is some kind translated back into TypeScript. And this is the reason for these map files. So these map files are for debugging purposes only. If you want to take a look, it's your entire source code and a lot of letters that you probably will never take a look at because it's for machine eyes only. Got it? So please remember from this demo the following. Use npm run build if you want to build, and now listen, a production build for production purposes. Use npm run build configuration development to create a development build, including debug information. It's slower, it's way larger, it's not for production purposes. It's only for testing and debugging. Got it? Questions? Awesome, very good. Now, next one. Give me a second. Good, we're going in time. Let's take a look at the anatomy of this application. We now have learned about the dist folder, we have learned about the node modules folder, and then we have a bunch of files here on the left-hand side in the root folder of our application. I mean these files that you see here. These files here. These files are all settings, project settings. Let's quickly go through them. Package.json. Are you familiar with package.json? I hope so. What is package.json? Yes?
It just defines all the
All that? Dependencies, right. All the dependencies are in package.json, correct. And the best friend, the brother or sister of package.json is package.lock.json. I will not go into the details, just believe me, it's useful. If you want to know all the details about package.lock.json, please Google it. I don't have enough time to go into the details here. What are these files down here? All these ts, config, whatever JSON. Guess. What could ts stand for? Yes?
The settings for the TypeScript version you're using and the setup for the transpiler.
Really? The first thing that you said, the settings for the TypeScript version is not correct. Everything else is correct because the TypeScript version is a dependency and the TypeScript version is here in the package.json file. Here's the TypeScript version. So we are currently using 4.3.5 as our TypeScript version. These are the settings of the transpiler. You are absolutely correct. They are the settings of the transpiler. If we take a look at that one, you will see a bunch of settings. And see, this is what I meant with one ring to rule them all, an opinionated framework. With Angular, you don't need to fiddle around to find the right settings for the compiler and so on. You just say ng new, and at the end, you get all the right settings, all the right versions. Everything is set up for you. Do not change any settings that Angular CLI generates for you unless you are an Angular professional and you are no Angular professionals yet. You have to work for years with Angular until you can consider yourself a real professional with Angular, okay? So for now, just accept the things that Angular gives you. Got it? But this is now Angular 12. What should you do when Angular 13 comes out and you want to update your app? What would you do? What do you think? Do you think it would be a good idea to go through all these settings and change them manually? Obviously not. There is a great URL here, which is called update.angular.io. You go to this update.angular.io, you select what is my old version, what is the new version of the project, how complex is my project, in your case typically medium or basic, and then you just say, show me how to update. And then you will get a checklist down here. You just follow these points here, and when you ticked all of these boxes, then your app is is updated. And one step inside of this update process is the ng update command. You see that one? So again, the Angular CLI. And this command will update all your dependencies, will maybe change some TypeScript settings and things like that. So again, now you know why having Angular as a small, nice software robot sitting beside you, helping you performing your tasks is a great thing. Because with smaller framework, you have to do these jobs on your own. You have to take a look at 17 different frameworks, and you get a README file for every of these frameworks, and if you are unlucky, then you use framework A, and it's incompatible with the newest version of framework B, and you have to find that out after hours of looking for bugs and reading GitHub postings. The Angular CLI does a very good job in keeping everything up to date, and you can relatively trouble-free update from one version to the other. Most times it's really a smooth ride. Sometimes it's a little bit more work, but in general it works really well. Okay, that's the big difference in practice between small best-of-breed approaches and using a framework like Angular. This is the reason why I will not go into the details of all the different versions here, because you really don't have to care. Just follow update.angular.io and they will update your dependencies for you. However, if you add some third-party controls, let's say you want to have a great user interface control from, I don't know, maybe Telerik or something like this, then you are on your own. You have to maintain your own libraries. Good. Nice. These were the TypeScript settings. README is okay. Oh, what is that one? Karma. Sounds like Indian religion, right? Bad karma. What do you think is karma? Have you heard about karma in your Angular lessons last year? No. Karma is for unit testing. Karma is the test runner. By default, Angular is using Jasmine for testing and Karma for running the tests. But this is currently undergoing a change. Karma and Jasmine are very good projects, but currently another rock star is entering the scene, and this rock star is called Jest. Jest is an even more awesome testing framework. The documentation is better, the SDK is better, it's easier to use, it has at least as many features as Jasmine and Karma. So when we talk about unit testing later on in this semester, we are going to change the configuration of our Angular project in order to use Jest instead of Jasmine and Karma. So if you are currently going into a company and they are using Angular, they are using Karma and Jasmine. But in the future, let's say in a year or two, it's very likely that they are going to use Jest. So this is Karma. Browser list is not that important. It's about browser compatibility, whether you want to deal with old Internet Explorer versions. We don't care about that in this course. Editor config, have you ever heard of editor config? You have, right? Come on, let me know. Editor config? You don't know editor config? Ah, very good. I can teach you things. Editor config. Editor config. Editor config is a great open source project. You know, the problem is that in modern development teams, not everybody's using the same tooling. Some are using, I don't know, Visual Studio Code. Some are using Visual Studio. Some are using WebStorm from, come on. JetBrains, thank you. I'm so stupid. Every team member is using something different. And the problem is, where do you store the editor settings? Do you want to use tabs or spaces? Do you want to use two spaces or 4 spaces? Do you want to have the curly braces on the same line as the if or in the next line of the if? You know these problems? Editor config is an open source project where the initiators of this project thought, hey, let's put all these settings in a development environment independent settings file. And then all the different vendors, Microsoft, JetBrains, and so on, they should take a look at this editor config file so that everybody can freely choose the tool and still the source code will look the same. That is editor config. Okay? And Angular will give you an editor config file out of the box. That's this one. And last but not least, the most important settings file of all, if we build Angular, that's Angular JSON. The Angular JSON file, this one. Come on. Internet is not that fast here, but I will manage to do it. Come on. Yes. This one. And this file is driving the NG tools. So this file is where the NG tools get all their data from. So when you say ng build, the build tool will take a look at Angular JSON, and there you have all your project settings. This Angular JSON file is in details documented in the Angular documentation. And sometimes, in practice, in most cases, you will need to change settings in this Angular JSON file. It's a long file. It's not a trivial file. In this course, you will probably never change anything here, but you should remember what Angular JSON is all about. So if you have an oral exam, a mündliche Prüfung with me, it might happen that I ask you, what is the difference between Angular JSON and tsconfig JSON? And then I want you to tell me tsconfig JSON is for compiler settings, while Angular JSON are the settings for the Angular CLI. Got it? Good. So Angular JSON is really relevant. Nice. Breathe in, breathe out. New topic. Now we are going into the source code. Let's take a look at source app, and there we find this app component HTML. This app component HTML file contains some HTML stuff. As you can see it here, you get some auto-generated stuff, and the first thing that we are going to do is we go at the very end of this file. You see this comment? This is just a placeholder, generated marketing, blah, blah. We don't need that one. So we mark everything onto the first letter in this file and delete it. The only thing that keeps alive here is the router outlet. Please do not delete the router outlet. We will talk about routing later. Let's put a h1 here and say hello Angular, okay? Let's run the app. npm start. So you replace the placeholder with just hello Angular, and then you run npm start. As you can see here, the app will be built. You can open it up in the browser, and in the browser you will see hello Angular. Awesome. If we take a look at the browser and take a look at the elements, you will see here we find, oops, that was a little bit too fast. Here we find h1 hello Angular. Now I have a question for you, a quiz. Describe technically, in the most detailed way that you can, what the Angular tools do with this HTML file? How does the content of this HTML file end up here in the browser? Who has an idea? What do you think? Come on, guess. You've seen before that we have a dist file here, a dist folder here. What do you think? Does this app component HTML, is it copied into index.html? Or is it some way magically part of this JavaScript stuff here? Yes, guess.
If I remember correctly, in the index.html there is a root to the app component.html, no?
Nope. The index HTML does not refer to this HTML file. Okay, I see. I can again teach you something new. One of the most important things that you have to remember when it comes to Angular is, and now listen closely because this is important, Angular is compiling HTML into JavaScript. Yes, you have heard correctly. Angular compiles HTML into JavaScript. When you execute the Angular application at runtime, there is no app component HTML anymore. It is gone. Poof, it's away. Angular takes all HTML files and compiles them first into TypeScript and then into JavaScript. I could prove you that, but unfortunately we don't have the time to go into the very details. But this is a super important distinction of Angular. Angular compiles HTML, not just TypeScript. So Angular really has a compiler for HTML into TypeScript and JavaScript. Yes, question?
It also kind of makes sense because the .html file isn't really sort of plain HTML file.
Right, exactly.
TypeScript code in some of it.
No, that was not correct. The first part was correct. It's not just plain HTML. It's a so-called Angular template language. It looks like HTML. It smells like HTML. It behaves a little bit like HTML, but not exactly. It's more than HTML. And you said you can have TypeScript in the middle of Angular HTML, and that is not true. Again, it looks like TypeScript, but it isn't TypeScript. It's Angular expression language. That's very much different from React, for instance. In React, you mix up HTML with real TypeScript. That's not the case in Angular. In Angular, you have the HTML template files with the Angular expression language, and then you have the TypeScript files, and they are separated. Okay, question?
So for example, a hook on a variable would be Angular expression language.
If you mean with hook, a data binding?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, that would be Angular expression language, and I will show you that in a second. Okay? So this is super important, and I can prove it to you in a very simple way. You can try that. Just make a mistake. Change this H1 to H2, then go to the browser and see what's going to happen. Failed to compile. Do you know what typically a browser would do if you give him an HTML file like that? Would it display such a black area with a red error message? No. What would it do? Yes?
Everything would be H1.
Everything would be H1. The browser would say, okay, Rainer messed it up. He specified end tag H2, but I guess he means H1. So the browser is very failure tolerant. And just by making this mistake, you see that Angular behaves completely different. And here you see the work of the compiler. I can switch back to my compiler, and the beautiful thing here is that Angular will even give me meaningful error messages for HTML. You see that one? This is super useful because sometimes we as developers, we make mistakes. Not consciously, but by mistake. And the Angular compiler can help us. So we can fix that one, and everything is good again. With that, the browser is refreshed, everything is good. So What we have to take away from this first lesson is, what is Angular? I told you at the beginning in the intro section. You've now heard about how to create new Angular apps. You've heard things about how to configure an Angular app. And I told you a lot of details about how Angular works behind the scenes, about compiling these Angular applications, okay? Now, we will have, if I take a look at the clock, we will have a short break until 12:45, and then we will switch gears. We will no longer talk about the project settings, but we will write code. I will show you data binding, I will show you how TypeScript and HTML works together. This will be the topic of the second lesson. For now, enjoy the break. 12:45, we will continue.